Guys, this character has been doing no damage for like 18 months.
Anemo test 63. Absorption test. Anemo. Sweet dreams.
Oh my god. Welcome to Snezhnaya, guys. So Snezhnaya is releasing a new reaction, Stellar Swirl, and specifically this video is with Mizuki Stellar Swirl teams, which first of all is really cool because Genshin hasn't had real Swirl based teams since its release. So as you know, Mizuki received buffs last patch. However, you might have noticed all the other characters were either Electro or Cryo for the Stellar Conduct update. In essence, she honestly got buffed one patch too early because the real anemo patch is coming now, because the game is adding Stellar Swirl into the system and in a few characters kits, and it's not just adding it just for the sake of adding it. Some of these changes are actually very significant. And Mizuki, similar to other buffed characters like Yamiko or Risley getting direct Stellar Conduct in their kits, Mizuki is getting direct Stellar Swirl interactions in her kit. Now as things stand, Mizuki, Chi-Chi, Diona, Sandrone have all received updates for Stellar Swirl, and in 7.0 we're getting the Cryo Traveler and Odette, who synergize with a reaction too. So that is quite a lot of characters to form your core team, but for now, there isn't a limited DPS, so Mizuki is your DPS. Now, you might think Mizuki is a standard DPS you can get for free. In fact, you might even be able to get her C1 for free. But if you can take one thing from this video, Mizuki is extremely strong, and I highly recommend you start leveling her in preparation for Snezhnaya. You will not regret it unless you really just don't like Mizuki as a character. Here are some strengths. Stellar Swirl teams are very accessible teams and very accessible gear. In fact, a lot of these are old free characters, and a lot of the gear are a lot of things you likely already have, including artifacts and weapons. The team's damage is very modern. They're very easy to play. In fact, Mizuki teams might actually be the easiest teams to play. We'll also get into this, but stellar mechanics are of course good versus the new content, enemies, and endgame. The one limited 5-star you can pull for this team being the new character Odette. She is seemingly quite universal for Snezhnaya. And lastly, Mizuki being a standard 5-star and your main DPS. This team will naturally get stronger over time as you lose more and more 50-50s to Mizuki and you get her constellations up. So we're turning negatives into positives out here. So the first advantage is that this team really is easy to obtain. Mizuki herself is available in the future Temper Thyself constellation program, and she's highly likely to be straight up free from the upcoming anniversary patch. They always give out standard characters. Sucrose is not hard to get and she's perfectly good at C0. The main character is of course free, and Diona, I believe, is being given for free in one of the 7.0 events. And this patch, we're actually getting a signature weapon for the main character, which is insanely good. And this is being given out for free. Honestly, a meta team with the Traveler is so cool to see. And I know a lot of you that this team will be very appealing because of that. Maybe some of you pay Molani, but for a lot of you, this might be the first insanely strong Traveler team that you're probably playing. Also, I'm really curious on what the 4-star banner is going to look like. They've already announced in the live stream that Alyosha is going to be one of the 4-stars. But Sucrose, Diona, even Faruzan, the other 2 4-stars on the banner have a good chance of being very good as well. Also, it's not just the characters. Along with the MC's weapon being free, a lot of the weapons that you will use in these teams, they are strong and they are 4-stars, like Sacrificial Fragments. In fact, Faronius Bow you get for free. That's good on Diona. And it's good on Faruzan. Odette is really good with one of the upcoming craftable weapons, Emberwell. And honestly, even if you don't have Mizuki's signature, which I feel like 99% of players probably don't, her being EM scaling gives her a ton of very good options, like Witz's, Sack Frags, and more that we'll get into. And even a lot of these artifacts, you might already have these sets good to go. Pretty much 90% of the things about Stellar Swirl are very easy to obtain. So back to basics. You're probably wondering, what is Stellar Swirl? What does it do? So first of all, you apply Cryo and then you swirl with anemo. So what it does is it creates a vortex, and that vortex can explode. And you can see that damage there. Its damage, AoE, and speed of the explosion scales with the amount of Stellar Swirls your team does. So this is similar to Stellar Conduct teams, how you wanted to just stack a bunch of Cryo and Electro on your teams. But instead of being buffing focused like Stellar Conduct was, Stellar Swirl is damaging focused. And that damage can really skyrocket when you actually just start doing proper rotations.
Turn that frown upside down.
Look at that. Some of that is Mizuki's direct Stellar Swirl damage. Some of that is the actual Stellar Swirl vortex reaction. And yep, just like a lot of modern reactions, Stellar Swirl can crit. So you're going to want to build crit on your team, including Mizuki, which we'll get into. It's also similar to Lunar reactions, where it uses your whole team stats. And this can make things like team-wide EM buffs really good. I don't want to spoil too much, but it's also important to play either Stellar Swirl or Stellar Conduct as you explore and fight enemies in Snezhnaya, because as you'll realize, a lot of the newer enemies get weaker by playing the new reactions. What's also cool is after you do one of the vortexes in Stellar Swirl, you will notice how your characters can jump a bit higher. Look at that. Maybe that could be useful? I have no idea. So Mizuki's original kit didn't really work that well because she was basically designed as a Swirl team, on-field driver and healer. I honestly think she never even got a single teammate, let alone a full team to play Swirl with. But even then, her kit was mainly designed so she's partially a buffer and her multipliers were low, so she was more of a driver than a carry. What her new kit does is give her carry level damage, whilst providing significant buffs. 1000% EM direct Stellar Swirl reaction damage every 2.5 seconds 4 times in her skill. The C1 also further increases this by 400%, 3 times per skill. She also does all this whilst contributing to your team's Stellar Swirl vortex reaction damage. Remember, Stellar Swirl is not just your character's direct damage, you also deal damage with the vortex. And she's doing all of that whilst buffing the team's EM, if you have the C2, even damage bonus and res reduction, and even increasing your team's Swirl and Stellar Swirl damage. So if you haven't played much Mizuki before, her gameplay might seem quite weird. You set up with your team and then you press her skill and you kind of just float around whilst you do damage automatically. You can either dodge enemies through moving, or you can just straight up dash to dodge enemies and she'll just keep dealing damage. As you can see, her kit, along with the Stellar Swirls on your team, have great AoE. However, if you're using supports that have limited range, like for example Chi-Chi, then maybe you want to hug enemies, something like that. Her burst isn't critical to your team, but it has great healing. It doesn't do much damage because unlike her skill, which has direct Stellar Swirl damage and it scales off of her EM, the only EM scaling in the burst is the actual healing aspect. Her burst damage is just normal attack scaling multipliers, which is nothing. However, does her burst contribute to Stellar Swirl damage? This is my team's damage without Mizuki's burst. And this is my team's damage with Mizuki's burst. So the team's actually quite easy to play. The Cryo Traveler's skill has off-field cryo and does damage over time, which is very nice. And then he also does very good damage with his infused charge attack and his burst. And the infused charge attack actually buffs the burst damage as well. But in order to get the infused charge attack, your team needs to have done some Stellar Swirls. So once you've done that, you just switch to him and you do all 3: skill, charge attack, and burst. Odette is also very straightforward. She basically has 2 skills. Her first skill activates her off-field cryo. But then her second skill, which you want to press very quickly, activates Stellar Swirl damage. However, you do want your team to have done Stellar Swirls before you switch to Odette, just to maximize her kit. So you create a Stellar Swirl with a team, then you press double E on Odette. Then maybe you want to refresh buffs on your anemo character, and then you press Mizuki skill and you just move around. It's very straightforward to play a team like this. You can see the damage is quite good. Maybe you want to refresh Sucrose's buffs and then do the MCE charge attack Q into Odette. Refresh your buffs with Sucrose and repeat. Very straightforward. And you can see this team is very capable of doing good damage before you even switch to Mizuki. Look at this. Look at those numbers. So because a lot of your off-fielders can do very good damage themselves, how much buffs does Mizuki give to your off-fielders? First of all, her skill gives 4.2% stellar damage per 100 EM. She also buffs her own EM by 100. And she also increases your whole party's EM based on 10% of her EM. With my current build, I have 872 EM. And my Traveler has 325. When I switch to my Mizuki, I have almost 1,200 EM. I press her skill. Now she has 1,600, which means my Traveler has gone up to 815 EM. That is not just Mizuki, that is also Sucrose sharing 20% of her EM and giving some EM boost for her talent and giving EM boost for her instructor. But as you can see, the whole team has a disgusting amount of EM, which also means her skill, even if you only had like 1,200 EM, she would be giving your whole team 50% Stellar Swirl damage bonus. So let's get into a very tricky part of the video, which is how should you build your Mizuki team. Now, if you have experience playing Nefa, then Mizuki is very similar. Both characters want a lot of EM and a lot of crit. Your Mizuki might have not wanted crit before, but now that most of her damage can crit, you do want that. But you also want EM because so many of her things scale with EM. The big difference, however, is Nefa only really has one artifact option. Knights of the Sky's Unveiling. Mizuki has several options. Even though we have a few new sets, these new sets aren't numerically boosted compared to the old sets. You can use a new set, Scarlet Proof. This is good. You can also use 4-piece Gilded Dreams. If you have this, this is also good for EM. You can also just use 2-piece EM sets like 2-piece Gilded Dreams, 2-piece Wanderer's Troop, and you can also use the VV set, which actually has been updated to increase your Stellar Swirl reaction damage by quite a bit. My conclusion is all of these sets are quite similar in total DPS. There is no clear-cut best in slot. This new set here, Scarlet Proof, is designed specifically for Stellar Swirl. However, it's not definitively best in slot because its 2-piece gives attack here, which is wasted on Mizuki, but its overall power scaling is clearly designed around attack scaling Stellar Swirl characters to truly benefit from this set. But that's fine because it means they have balanced Mizuki around having no true BIS set. So for example, I'm using VV right now, and whilst I don't think VV is BIS either, it's a very strong short-term set. It's also advantageous for your on-fielder to use VV. It's very good for increasing your team's damage through this Cryo res shred, and you have this on your on-fielder who will constantly be refreshing those debuffs, making it very good in AoE. But it also comes down to artifact availability. Like for me personally, you might have farmed VV pieces for years with crit stats, which you'd never really use otherwise, whereas some of the other sets might be quite contested. But it's worth noting that the full Gilded Dream set, you'll only get 80 EM plus 100, so 180, which is actually only 20 EM more than stacking 2-piece sets. And if you've got insane 2-piece pieces, that can easily be your BIS. 20 EM is nothing. It's basically just 1 EM substat roll. Although I would say long term, a lot of people probably should be transitioning to the Stellar Swirl set because it's in the same domain as your support set, which is a very important set to farm. You'll probably have a good Scarlet Proof set anyway. So pick one of those options, use what you have. I think the more important question is how do you build the rest of your team? And there's two extremely important support sets. One of them is the new Stellar buffing set, Heart of the Furnace, which you can have on many characters like Odette, the Cryo Traveler, Chi-Chi. This will increase your team's Stellar Glimmer reaction damage by 50%, so it's massive. The other important set is Instructor. Because Mizuki is not attack scaling, This is the only real old buffing set that really buffs the whole team. And that's one of the benefits of using VV. You won't really be able to trigger a reaction with your cryo characters. The best users of instructor are anemo characters. If you're not using VV on Mizuki, then you either have to sacrifice instructor or VV, which can make things awkward because you're running out of good sets. Then if you've got both of those sets covered for your last character, you don't really have much options. You can get attack buffs from Noblesse or Tenacity. Tenacity does work because the MC does have damage over time, but this attack buff is only really going to benefit him and Odette, not Mizuki. How important is VV and Instructor? This is my team's damage with Mizuki on VV and Sucrose on Instructor. And then this is the damage with Scarlet, Proof, and VV on Sucrose, so no Instructor. So VV won't apply on the enemies in AoE, but it's still pretty good. But the overall conclusion is, as long as you've got Heart of the Furnace on one of your characters, there is a lot of different flexibility and the damage differences aren't that important. The main thing is in AoE content, having VV on one of your off-fielders means it won't refresh in multi-wave, whereas having VV on your on-fielder will refresh the buffs. Always keep in mind cryo res. As you know, Swirl won't be removing the cryo aura, so you'll basically have very high uptime on this, so you want to be factoring in that 15% free crit rate. Let's get into weapons. So you're looking for weapons that give EM or crit, and whilst Mizuki isn't going to be a hyper carry in your teams doing all your team's damage, she's definitely not the Mizuki of old, so definitely don't think about using pure support weapons like TTDS or Fav, or honestly even a Wandering Evenstar. She doesn't benefit from the attack herself, and most of her teammates won't benefit from the attack either. As for 5-star weapons, Mizuki's signature is very ideal. It gives just a ton of EM. However, Nef's signature is also very close to Biss. Instead of giving a ton of EM, it only gives 80 EM, but it gives a ton of crit damage and crit rate. And to be honest, you're probably more likely to have this than have Mizuki Sig. So those are the premium options. Unfortunately, EM based Catalyst users don't have great force options. There's the classic Widsith, but it's not perfect because unlike someone like Yai Miko or Klee, Mizuki only really wants the elemental mastery buff here. So although the damage is going to be super high if you get that buff, you're going to have a lot of inconsistency and downtime where you're not really getting any buffs and then you're just getting the crit damage from Widsith. Another option is Sacrificial Fragments. It just gives a ton of EM and it can let you extend Mizuki's rotations, which I haven't found that much use out of this. But also, if you have Sac Frags, I'd rather use it on Sucrose. There is also the new craftable from Snezhnaya, Echoes of the Heart. This does give EM and stellar reaction damage, which is very nice. However, it gives attack. There's also Sacrificial Jade, which gives a ton of crit rate and a little bit of EM. And although I don't have it, I would also like to talk about Dawning Frost, which is a gacha 4-star that you might have picked up putting on one of Nef's banners. This weapon gives crit damage as its secondary stat, and it can give up to 250 EM. The only issue of that is most of that, depending on your refinement, requires her to use her charge attack, which is a bit awkward. If you want to use it, you'd have to do like that and then use her E. But I'm pretty sure that weapon should just have the most stats period, at least if you have it at R5. Me personally, I'd probably recommend Sac Frags if you're not playing Sucrose, but if you are playing Sucrose, give her Sac Frags and just use the Widsith for general play. Okay, let's get into team building. So Mizuki doesn't actually have a fixed team, which is very great for the free-to-play friendliness, and even Odette herself isn't necessary. The most important thing is Mizuki herself cannot activate Stellar Swirl. You do need to add a new character that can activate Stellar Swirl, just like with the Nod Cryo reaction. So either Odette, or luckily this time, the Cryo main character can activate it. So a must-have teammate has to be either Odette or the Traveler. But there are a lot of options here. Sucrose, Faruzan, Diona, Chi-Chi. The cool thing about the Cryo characters that got buffed last patch is they actually also got buffed this patch. but they also now synergize with both Stellar Conduct and also Stellar Swirl. So Chi-Chi can buff the team's Stellar Swirl damage by 50%. And then if you look at Diona's C6, she can now give 40% Cryo Swirl and Stellar Swirl damage on top of her massive 200 EM. Diona giving 200 EM is really nice because Mizuki really likes the EM. It's extra advantageous. But speaking of EM, as you may have seen already, that makes Sucrose a great option. Not only can she give Diona level EM to Mizuki, but she can give it to the whole team. And then on top of that, she has access to 2 really strong sets, VV, which will increase your team's cryo damage, or Instructor, which will increase all your characters' EM, which will increase Sucrose's own buff, and it will increase Mizuki's own buff. EM is just very nice. On top of that, Faruzan is also looking like a really good option. While she doesn't give EM buffs, she will be able to use VV quite well, or Instructor if you really want. But she has Anemo Res Shred with her burst. On top of that, her C6 does give crit damage. Honestly, she can even use Elegy for the end for an extra EM for the team. In my testing, I wouldn't think she's optimal over Sucrose, especially as you invest more into your team. For example, if you get Mizuki C2, she will give Res Shred herself. Not as much as Faruzan, but this does dilute the benefit of Faruzan. Plus, Mizuki teams are designed for very short 15 to 18 second rotations, whereas Faruzan's burst has a 19-second cooldown. However, there are a lot of modern teams that want Sucrose, so if you're playing multiple teams, you need Sucrose everywhere. I think Faruzan, if you have her constellations, will be a very nice substitute. Now, I'm curious, and you're probably curious, does Faruzan C6 giving crit damage buff your Mizuki and your Stellar Swirl damage? This is one of those things that you have to test in-game because you don't really know how the devs are going to do it. 215, 257, 257. Now if I activate Faruzan C6, do I get an extra 40% crit damage?
Time to relax.
270k into 330 and 270. The cool thing with Faruzan C6 is the off-field swirls will also contribute towards your vortex stacks. But it looks like the crit damage itself does count. It obviously won't buff your Odette's damage or any of your cryo damage, but it seems quite significant. And you get extra off-field swirls. So yes, Faruzan C6 is very important. You're probably also wondering, do you need to build ER for Sucrose? So you can build some ER on your Sucrose without sacrificing EM, but maximizing her EM is going to maximize your buffs. But being able to spam her burst will give you more off-field swirls, which will increase your vortex damage. The thing is though, can't you just, I would much rather just burst every other rotation and just maximize her buffs. Because I think this is the way to go. I wouldn't worry about having to have like maybe 200 ER or having to use a Favonius weapon. I don't think the trade-off is worth it. There are some good alternatives. Hazel, Lanyan, Yehoda. These characters are kind of budget Sucroses. Hazel giving your party 80 EM. Lanyan, if you have a C4, should give 60 EM to your party. Yehoda, even if you're not playing a double Nodcry team, will give your party 100 EM. Even Kazuha, if you have him at C2, if you use his burst, he can give your on-fielder 200 EM. Although, to be honest, I'm curious. If I played Kazuha in a Stellar Swirl team, I think I'd build him for crit rather than for EM because his damage bonus share doesn't really matter because none of the characters really care about damage bonus. Honestly, Zhongli can also work. He could also use Instructor. On top of that, his shield can give all type Res Shred, which will increase all your damage in your team. And then if you have Odette, like I said, as long as you have either Odette or MC, they are required, but Odette is not required. You should be able to replace her with Diona. Diona won't do as much damage as Odette, but her buffs for Mizuki are very good. So lastly, I'm going to show some of these Mizuki teams in action in Stygian and in the Abyss.
Swirl, Mark, time to relax. Bad dreams be gone. Stay clear. Turn that frown upside down. Bad dreams be gone. Enhanced anemo mod. Absorption test. Sweet dreams. Stay clear. Have fun with this gift. Sweet dreams. Bad dreams be gone. Dare to mess with me? Tears of the storm. Too late for regret. Dare to mess with me? Have fun with this gift. Turn that frown upside down.
So if you're still feeling sleepy, take it off.
Anemo Tech 63. Absorption test. Stay clear. Sweet dreams. Yachan, Taechan, let's go. Absorption test. Anemo hypostasis emulate. Anemo Tech 63 awake. dreams be gone. Anemo Tech 63 awaits. Sweet dreams. Stay clear. Anemo hypostasis emulation. Anemo tech. Time to relax. Yachan, Taechan, let's go.
So that's it for this video. Again, I highly recommend you consider investing in Mizuki before Snezhnaya. And whether you want to pull Odette to strengthen the team is up to you. I think Mizuki is also worth considering getting the next time you get a free started character. And the only thing is, yeah, at some point they probably will release limited 5-star DPS for Swirl teams, whether that's Cryo or Anemo, and they probably will be stronger than Mizuki, but will they be stronger than a C1 or C2 Mizuki that you might have? I'm not sure. I guess the more important question is, will they design some future content where you can't clear it with your budget Mizuki team, but you can clear it with the limited 5-star? Will they design specific mechanics to counter her? Maybe, or maybe not. At least for now, I'm really enjoying playing Mizuki. I'm farming for her. You should farm for her. And thanks for watching, guys. Stay tuned for my other videos.